The siege of Ganja and storming its citadel was the result of a Russian offensive in the South Caucasus intended to conquer the Ganja Khanate, which contributed to the escalation of the Russo-Persian War. Prologue. After decision of Tsar Paul to annex Georgia and, after Paul's assassination, the activist policy followed by his successor, Alexander I, aimed at establishing Russian control over the Khanates of the Eastern Caucasus. In 1803, the newly appointed commander of Russian forces in the Caucasus, Paul Tsitsianov, attacked Ganja. After Muhammad Khan Kayar invasion of Tbilisi, which Javad Khan fought alongside Aga Muhammad Khan, Tsitsianov wrote a letter to Javad Khan, demanding a voluntary surrender. Javad Khan answered. After this response, the Russian troops moved forward, and opened gunfire. Javad Khan defended heroically and the siege lasted a month. Tsitsianov renewed demands to surrender for 5 times, but to no avail. "I'll take the fortress and I will deliver thee to death," he wrote, and the stubborn Khan answered, "You'll find me dead on the fortress wall," and both vowed to fulfill his promises. Finally, the 14th in January 1804, the Russian Council of War decided to do the assault the next day. Battle. Tsitsianov divided the Russian troops into 2 columns. One was entrusted to Major General Portnyagin and the other to Colonel Karyagina. Early morning, January 15, the column of Portnyagin approached the Karabagh Gate, and pierced a hole in the ground before the wall. But because the defenders have focused their main forces on the site of the gap, then Portnyagin left it aside and stormed the ramparts with ladders. The resistance he met was so great that the Russian troops resumed the attack twice, and twice were repulsed with considerable loss. Then Portnyagin rushed himself at the head of the column and first went to the wall, followed by a lieutenant of the regiment of the Nalva that fell, struck by several bullets. Then Major Bartanev of Caucasus Grenadier Regiment fell, and finally, it was Lieutenant Colonel Simonovich Grenadiers that managed to climb the stairs to the wall and help out Portnyagina. Meanwhile, the second column, led by Colonel Karyagina, ascended the wall from the gate of Tbilisi, and took possession of the main tower. The other 2 towers were taken one by Major Lisanovich. Javad Khan, who did not want to seek safety in flight, took the gun and sword in hand and defended himself until he has been killed by Captain Karlovsky, who himself was immediately killed by the defenders. Khan's death brought confusion into the ranks of the defenders, but they still showed resistance and piled heavy stones. The city at this time was in a terrible confusion. Crowds of the people, on horse and foot, rushed in disorder on the streets, vainly searching for already deceased Khan. Bewildered residents hid in their homes and barns. Women filled the air with frantic cries. Meanwhile, Russian soldiers with bayonets cleared the street, entirely covered with dead bodies, and seized the booty, finding on a horseback some precious gold jewelry. By noon the battle began to subside, and broke again only for a moment when, according to Samsonov, the soldiers came upon 500 men, who have entrenched themselves in the Juma Mosque. At first they offered to surrender, but when one Armenian said that among them are some Lesgans, it was the signal for the death of all defenders. Because the hatred of Lesvins was so strong among the Russian troops, Tsitsianov deeply appreciated the effort of the soldiers in the capture of the fortress and wrote, "This is proof of moral superiority of Russian Empire over Persians, and that spirit of confidence in the victory will feed and warm up the soldiers that I consider as my first purpose." The elder son of Javad Khan, Hossein Kli Khan, was also killed during the battle. The rest of the Khan's family was taken prisoner and years later were given permission to go to Iran via Baku. His younger son, Ufurlu, survived. went to Iran and later fought the Russian Empire when the Iranians attacked Ganja in the Second Russo-Persian War. Massacre. Various Persian and Western historians have written on the dimensions of the massacre that took place after the fall of the city. Etemad al-Sultan states that the massacre that ensued after the battle continued for 3 days. Hedayat has a more accurate time of 3 hours. Abbasgulubaki-Kanov mentions the massacre but does not give more information. Older estimates give the number of 7,000 but new sources claim 3,000 peoples massacred by the bloody Russians. Shah's response. At the beginning of the battle, Javad Khan sent a messenger to Fath Ali Shah and asked reinforcement. Shah gathered a 30,000-strong force and sent him to Ganja. But the force did not reach the Ganja in time because of the coldness of January and also because Husain Kulu Khan Kayar, the governor Khan of Yerevan Khanate, had rebelled against the Shah and only one letter carrier, Said Bek, reached the town in time. Aftermath. Taking Ganja was an event of extraordinary importance because it was considered a fortress key to the northern provinces of Persia. Therefore, wishing to show that the Russian would never leave the conquered territory, the very name of Ganja should be cut off from people's memory. So Tsitsianov changed the name of city to Elizabethpol, after the wife of Alexander I of Russia. Elizabeth, referring to the place by its old name, became a crime punishable by a fine. The main mosque was turned into a church, and Russian law replaced Islamic law. However, as Swiatochovsky notes, the name Elizabethpol never found acceptance amongst the Azerbaijanis, who continued to call the town Ganja. Javad Khan's wives and other relatives who survived the battle but had not escaped to Iran were arrested. They were held as prisoners in the citadel until 1812, when they were freed by Tsitsianov's successor Philip Orluchy, who held the view, novel among Russian officials, that Javad Khan was a valiant man who died fighting to defend his interests. With Sishanov's attack on Ganja, the Russians had invaded Iranian territory. The issue was now no longer to impose tribute on the Lezgins or about reasserting Persian domination over Christian Georgia, which had happened several years before. Now, the integrity of Shiite Iran itself had been violated by the invasion of the Iranian town of Ganja. Immigration. 2 years after the Russian occupation of Ganja, Oghurali Khan, the son of Javad Khan with the assistance of Crown Prince Abbas Mirza, displaced many inhabitants of Ganja to inside the Iranian border. So protection of 6,000 families of inhabitants of Ganja was entrusted to Pir Gholi Khan Kayar, who displaced him to Tabriz. Then again in 1809, the Bozshalu and Irimlau tribes of Ganja get to Nakhchivan, and they were renamed to Narapapak. And finally, after Nakhchivan was ceded to Russia, they went to Soljuz, that is a place in Iranian West Azerbaijan province. Other main places of Narapapak residence are the provinces of Ardahan, Kars and Igdir in Turkey.